Hey guys, and welcome back to the 411 on Tech. So we got the ASUS ROG Ally in, and we're going to do our review video on it. So our thoughts on it quickly is, since the price is so close to a Steam Deck, it's definitely an alternative to a Steam Deck, being $51 more, but you get better performance, but is the experience better? So, we're going to get this thing all set up. We're going to talk in the video about design, the specs, the controls, and performance, and the overall experience. And also, we have other videos planned for. We're going to be doing an emulation video with EmuDeck. We had thought about Play Night, but we're probably going to do EmuDeck for Windows. We're going to have an accessories video. We're going to have a Steam Deck versus ASUS Ally video and a dock mode video coming up. So be sure to get subscribed and hit the notification bell for those videos coming up, but we're going to get into it right after this.
Let's talk about the overall look of the ROG Ally. The first thing you'll notice is its all-white body, which definitely makes it stand out. Now, I'm a big fan of a nice white and black color theme, so I think it looks really nice, but because it's white, it is going to be a little harder to keep looking clean and pristine. The grips on the back are more shallow than what you'll see on the Steam Deck, but it still makes the Ally comfortable to hold, and they have a textured feel to them too to help with grip. Now, the controller layout closely resembles that of an Xbox controller, so you have your joysticks in an asymmetrical layout. They are analog sticks, but they're not Hall effect, so you could potentially be dealing with some drifting down the road, but only time will tell. I personally like the joysticks. They feel really good, but they are a little on the light side. They have textured rubber on the edges on the thumb rest, and they're very concave, so your thumb shouldn't be sliding off during intense gameplay, and they're a good height too. Housed around the joysticks are RGB light rings, which are a nice touch and really pop against that white. Starting on the left side, you have your D-pad. At first, we weren't too thrilled about having a dish-shaped D-pad, but it's actually not bad. It feels decent, and while playing Street Fighter V, Damien was able to pull off some special moves with Ryu with no issue. On the left side of the screen, you have two buttons. The top button acts as your select or view button, and the bottom button brings up the command center. On the right side of the Ally, you have your A, B, X, Y buttons, which are more on the flatter side, but they still feel fine. They just don't feel as solid as the face buttons you would find on an Xbox or DualSense controller. You also have two more buttons on the right side of the screen. The top button acts as your start or menu button, and the bottom button brings up Armory Crate. Oh, and pro tip, if you long press that button, you'll get a controller overview, which comes in handy. Also on the front of the device on either side are dual front firing speakers, and the placement of them is pretty good, where we didn't find our hands covering them up while holding it. And I have to say, we were both really impressed by the sound that these little speakers put out. They get very loud, but they don't get distorted at all, even at max volume. And they have two-way AI noise canceling technology, which will help with filtering out background noises in your voice chats. It also supports high-res audio and Dolby Atmos. And when I was playing Guardians of the Galaxy, I really felt the sound was coming from all around me, and it sounded great. Now, on the top of the Ally, from left to right, you have your 3.5mm jack, a micro SD card slot. You have your XG Mobile PCIe port for connecting an external GPU. You have your USB-C charging port, and you can also use this port to connect to the dock or a hub and connect the Ally to an external monitor or a TV if you want. Then you have your volume up and down buttons, battery and charging indicator lights, and the power button, which also has a built-in fingerprint sensor, which is great for security and makes it a breeze to log in. You have your shoulder buttons and triggers, which feel pretty good. They are Hall effect triggers, so they shouldn't wear out on you over time. They feel very accurate and precise, especially in racing games, and the shoulder buttons and triggers have a nice feeling texture to them to keep your fingers in place. Also at the top, you have two exhaust fans, and on the back, two intake fans where the fan sits. Now, fan noise is definitely better than the Steam Deck, although there was a recent update that they're a little bit louder than what they were, but still not bad. Now you have two more buttons here on the back. They're your macro buttons for configuring button sequences, and just like any other button on the Ally, you can map these buttons to whatever you want. Now, I'll just say, I'm not a big fan of these buttons at all. I don't like the odd angle design of them, and if you hit them too close towards the grips, they don't depress. Now, Damien also found himself accidentally hitting them during intense gameplay, which can cause a window to pop up, so that could be an issue for some. but you don't have to use them and you can assign them to only activate if you hit a button sequence. The weight of the Ally is 608 grams or 1.34 pounds. And just so you have a size comparison, here's the ROG Ally next to the Steam Deck and Nintendo Switch. And let's talk about that beautiful display. The ROG Ally has a 7-inch 1080p 16:9 IPS touchscreen display that supports VRR and up to 120 Hz refresh rate. And you can really notice the difference coming from the Steam Deck. Games really look stunning on this higher res screen and it makes it a joy to play. It is brighter than the Steam Deck at 500 nits, but we still wouldn't recommend playing it in direct sunlight, especially if you're playing a darker game. We'll throw out the specs here for those who care, but another big seller of the ROG Ally is what's packed under the hood. AMD's all-new Z1 series SoC, which promises next-level performance, but more on that later. We have the Z1 Extreme, which you can buy now for $699, just $51 more than the most spec'd out Steam Deck. And later this year, you'll be able to buy the Z1 version for $599.
Okay, ASUS sells some accessories for the Ally at launch. They have a dock that allows for 65-watt charging. It has an HDMI out, so you can play it on your TV or on a monitor, and it has a USB port, so you can connect things like an 8BitDo controller, via the USB dongle. And the dock is $64.99. Now we're hoping to see docks around the $40 price point that will allow you to rest the ASUS Ally in and still charge at 65 watts. Now currently there's a bit of speculation on the market where you're not getting the full power and dock mode of some of those other docks as you do with the official ASUS dock. So we're looking to see how that develops. There's a pair of Bluetooth earbuds that you can get that complement the ROG Ally, and they look really smart. And then there's a carrying case that'll protect your ASUS Ally on the go, and we picked it up and it's $40. Now we don't like it as well as we like the Steam Deck case. I mean, it just doesn't really have like a hard clamshell, but it is a case and it's serviceable, and you can use that to protect it when you're on the go. ASUS has also launched a pair of controllers. They have like a Pro one and a non-Pro one, but the one that really caught our eye was the Rikiri Pro controller. It's like an Xbox Elite controller, but it has that disc D-pad on it, which is not going to be great for fighting games. I would rather see a traditional D-pad, but it has like a built-in OLED display. You can have like some graphics and you can go through profiles and do a number of things, but it's really pricey. It's $170, so I'm not sure that's going to be worth it. You can use other controllers, but they do have that also available as an accessory. Okay, so let's talk about software. When you first get started, you're going to have to do about 2 to 3 hours worth of updates. You'll have Armory Crate updates, My ASUS updates, Windows updates, AMD graphic driver updates. You'll need to do all of these updates to get your ASUS ROG Ally running smoothly. Now, running Windows on a handheld can be a little bit cumbersome. It's a mixture of touch controls, using the left stick as a mouse in desktop mode, and using the pop-up keyboard. We recommend using a keyboard and mouse. We use our Anchor dock and the Logitech K830 keyboard and mouse combo to get everything set up. Then we launch games from the Armory Crate SE software or directly from Steam using the controls built in with the Ally. While using the ASUS Ally, we did notice a few glitches, like the keyboard randomly popping up, and sometimes the shoulder buttons wouldn't switch between the sections in Armory Crate. In time, we're hoping that Windows for handheld gaming PCs becomes a thing, or that the Armory Crate becomes more like the SteamOS Big Picture mode. Now, the main piece of software making this more like a Steam Deck experience is the Armory Crate software. And in the Armory Crate software, which launches when you start up your ASUS Ally, you have a game library, and here you can launch your games directly from the Armory Crate software. You can use like via touch, or you can use the sticks to navigate between your different games and your game services. And after you get past the game launcher, you can just use the shoulder buttons and go over to settings. And in settings, you can configure the controller modes. You can configure the gamepad mode and the desktop mode. Now then, the gamepad mode, you can see here you can do things like key mapping, so you can change what the keys do, like the sticks do, secondary functions for those macro buttons in the back. You can change details about the the sticks, so you can change like the dead zones, the thresholds. You can do that, as I mentioned, for the left and right stick. You can change the triggers. You can change like the travel. So if you want more like a hair trigger, you can do that. So you can change, when you press this down when it's going to activate. You can make them both the same, or you can make one different than the other. So you have the mirror triggers function there. You can change the vibration of the haptics. Now I like at the 100% level. I don't really see a need to turn it down, but you may desire a little bit less of the vibration intensity, and you can change the left and the right side on that as well. Desktop mode, you can see here we can change what the controls do in desktop mode, what the triggers do, the vibration, and etc. And you can always switch it back to the default, as you can see over there on the right. Also, under settings, you have the operating mode. And the operating mode, you can see the different operating modes. They have Windows, which defaults to your default Windows power settings. You have Silent, which is 9 watts. You have Performance, which is 15 watts. You have Turbo, which is 25 watts. And you do have Manual. And in Manual, you can set like your own power profiles, and you can set one like, maybe you want like a 7-watt power profile and a fan curve for that, for some light indie gaming or emulation, so you can get the performance you need out of only 7 watts, and you can set fan curves for that. And then you can do like an 18-watt mode, which might be more of like a sweet spot for some AAA games and not having to go all the way to turbo, so you can get the performance and the frame rates that you want with the resolution, but not have to go all the way to turbo. So you can set that here, and I believe you can do 3 modes in here that you can set. And also in here you can change the lighting. I like the rainbow effect. That's the default. You can change the brightness, but there's also like static, breathing, strobing, so you can have like different lighting effects. You can have different lighting effects for different games as well. You can do that in here. You can also edit what shows up in the command center, which we'll talk about later. You can change the different items that come up. You can, if you don't want to see the screen record, if you don't really need that, you can take it off and add something else. You can do that there as well. And in the content, you have a media gallery, and this will be where all your screenshots and gameplay recordings will go. Under system, it'll give you a detailed information about specs on the system, the processor, and the display, and things like that. You can look at your storage allocation as well. And also there's a games platform section where you can log into all your game launcher services you may have, like Xbox Game Pass, EA, Steam, Epic Games, and etc. You can have those logged in. An important one is the Update Center. This is where you'll update Armory Crate and other features that are part of the Armory Crate. You would want to update that there. 2 more things I wanted to mention. So in the games library, you can set game profiles for each individual game, and you would just highlight the game and hit X, and then you can change the key mappings with the left sticks, the right stick, and the triggers and the vibration. So you can have individual key mappings for individual games. Also, another thing that I wanted to mention is in the settings, in the operating mode, for those manual modes, you can also set the fan curves for those operating modes, the custom ones that you make. So like, the 7-watt, and you wouldn't need as much fan as you would need for like turbo, so you can adjust those fan curves. You can adjust the fan curves for the fans to be the same, or you can make one different than the other. You can do that as well. So Armory Crate makes it easier to get around using Windows on a handheld, but it's still not as polished as SteamOS on a Steam Deck yet. I say yet, because hopefully in the future with the community and with ASUS, we'll get there. Now on in-game, you can bring up the command center. You do that by pressing the button on the left bottom below the select. And you bring up the command center. You can change things like the operating mode. You can change it, like from silent to performance. You can change the control mode. We have it on auto, so it switches in between desktop and gamepad mode. So we have that. You can load the game profiles, bring up the keyboard. You can have a real-time monitor, so tell you information about CPU, GPU usage, the APU wattage, both those performance modes, your FPS, and your battery percentage. You can bring those up. It also has a FPS limiter that you can bring up, and it's 30, 45, 60, 90, and 120, so you can have like the frame rate cap there, if you will. You can turn on things like AMD Radeon Super Resolution, so if you're at 720p, you turn that on, it'll upscale it to 1080p, and it'll be a light hit on the GPU. It can change the refresh rate and the resolution. Now you will have to do some things in-game as well, but you can do a few things from here. So you can change the refresh rate, you can do record the screen, and that'll show up in that media section that we talked about earlier. And you can also move that real-time monitor overlay anywhere on the screen by just tapping on it and dragging it, and you can move that anywhere on the screen you would like. We have it in the top right, but you can also move that somewhere else. Now, you can install MSI Afterburner if you like that better and not use this one, but it's pretty nice that there's one built in, so you don't have to worry about it if you don't want to.
Okay, so let's get to what you've all been waiting for, gaming performance. For performance testing, we played a number of AAA and indie games. Our focus was trying to strike a balance between performance and battery life while still taking advantage of the Ally's max resolution at 1080p. Therefore, we stuck to the performance and silent operating modes. Turbo mode will get you a higher frame rate, but in our testing of playing AAA titles in turbo mode, it really takes a hit on battery life. Some games might require the extra power to get a more playable frame rate, so you might need to play around in the gaming settings and switch between operating modes to get the best experience out of your games. For AAA games, we were able to achieve a steady FPS at 1080p in performance mode at low to medium settings in most games. In Guardians of the Galaxy, we were able to maintain a pretty smooth average 51 FPS with some dips down to 40 when a lot of action was on screen, and there were a few hiccups here or there. But it was very playable. The game looks great on this display, and the colors really pop. Even at low graphic presets, you're not sacrificing a lot of detail on the 7-inch display. And as I mentioned earlier, the Ally speakers really shine while playing this game. The audio was punchy and clear, and it felt like the sound was really coming from all around me, and it definitely added to the level of immersion. Next up, Spider-Man Remastered. Swinging around the city with Spider-Man was buttery smooth, and we were able to get an average of 44 FPS. This game plays very well on the Ally and looks great. The colors are just so vibrant, and the level of detail, especially on Spider-Man's suit, is great. And the controllers felt good even in intense fighting sequences. I didn't miss a beat. Our last AAA title here is Forza Horizon 5. And right off the bat, this game feels optimized to play on the ROG Ally. What's nice about this game is when you launch it, it actually goes through an optimizing for your PC step before loading the game, where it identifies your PC's components and attempts to dial in your settings to best suit them. We were able to pull off a very smooth 65 to 70 FPS on low settings without any help from FSR. Turning the graphics settings up to medium mostly maintained 60 FPS, but there were times where it would dip down into the 40s. We didn't really notice a big difference in detail between medium and low settings, so we would recommend just keeping it at low. Moving on to some indie games. First up is Ori and the Will of the Wisp, which will be able to take advantage of the ROG Ally's 120Hz refresh rate. Choosing the game's low graphics quality, we were able to get between 90 to 100 FPS. This is definitely a darker game, but with the Ally's 500 nits of peak brightness, it handles it great and it's still bright enough to see all the details in the scene. I still wouldn't recommend playing this game in direct sunlight though. And lastly, we have Castle of Illusions. At 1080p in the performance operating mode, we were able to get a smooth average 60 FPS, but to save on battery life, we would recommend switching to silent mode. Here we were able to get around 40 FPS, which is just fine for a side-scroller game like this, and it still played great. So, as you can see, with the ROG Ally's AMD Z1 Extreme SoC under the hood, it can handle these games with no problem, and we were still able to maintain a very playable FPS while still taking full advantage of the Ally's gorgeous 1080p display.
Okay, let's talk about battery performance, the elephant in the room. Now in silent mode, you'll get around almost 3 hours of battery life. This is going to be playing things like indie games and light emulation. Now, performance mode, where you're going to be playing AAA games at 15 watts, you're going to get about 1.5 to almost 2 hours of battery life in games. And in turbo mode, you're probably going to get just under 1 hour of battery life. Now, that's going to give you the best performance, and you'll be playing at the highest resolutions, the highest frame rates, but it's just going to be about 1 hour. So you might have to have that charger handy with you to, and be charging it, or a portable battery pack with you to charge to get more gameplay. Now, charging time from 0% to 100 takes about an hour, and if you're at 50% to fully charge, it takes about 30 minutes. So that's the story on battery life, and now we're going to get into final thoughts. So our thoughts on the ASUS ROG Ally. I think it has a lot of promise, it's just not there yet. It has great performance, allowing you to play AAA games at 1080p at really good frame rates, and the screen is very nice with the VRR, and you can get to 120 Hz in some games. However, there are drawbacks to gaming on the Windows handheld. The experience is just not as polished experience as you get on the Steam Deck. And there were a few minor glitches, as we mentioned. The keyboard kept popping up, the shoulder buttons wouldn't go through the different sections in the Armoury Crate SC software. And right now there's some issue where micro SD cards are overheating.
That can be a problem.
That can be a problem, yeah. They're not, they're not the priciest thing, but if you're paying like almost $100 for a micro SD card, you don't want that burning up. Now, we did do all of our testing on the BIOS 322. There is supposed to be a new BIOS coming out to address some of those thermals for the micro SD card. So I'll be interested to see where the ASUS ROG Ally is in 6 months from now to a year, when ASUS and the community themselves have had a chance to get the ASUS Ally in a much better place. What are your thoughts?
So I definitely agree with everything that you just said. I would recommend, if you're considering getting it, hold off a little while, wait to see if they start working out some more of these bugs. It still does run Windows, and you're still going to run into some issues with trying to run Windows on a handheld until maybe Microsoft decides to come out with a handheld,
Yeah, there were some talks about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're hoping for that. But if you want the game, the performance is great, the screen looks amazing, but if you want the smoothest, easiest,
turnkey
experience,
solution.
Yeah, I would still say Steam Deck right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's going to do it for this one, guys. Please do remember to subscribe, like, favorite, and comment. And also, there's 2 other videos that you might like that's going to be recommended with this video. So we'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye.